Hello friends, Fallen here from Forallintentions. Today, we're going to talk about the hardware and software side of the live stream setup. Live stream will be happening June 3rd, 7 p.m. here on YouTube. Don't miss it. All right, so let's start with these pedals, which is the main control point throughout the entire performance. This is a Yamaha MFC10 foot controller, and this is where I will be starting, stopping. I can advance to a different song if I so choose. I can reset automation if something goes wrong, which happens frequently when the computer crashes or an element crashes, which I'll get to later because everything is emulated. I also have a record button. I do plan on recording the live stream as it's happening on June 3rd at 7 p.m. so that I can post it later in a more professional quality, since I know that the actual upload and streaming aspect of things is limited. This is probably the most important foot controller of the entire lot here. This doubles as a tap tempo and an advance button. If I want as a tap tempo, I press the function button, and I would do this if I'm doing a song where I start to play before any of the drums. If the drums play first, they set the tempo. But if I'm playing first, I have to set the tempo. So I'd hit the function button, tap the tempo out on this button, press the function again, and then this becomes an advance button. So I would play the riff or melody or scene, and then it would repeat itself, and whenever I wanted to move on to the next one, I would hit the advance button. Depending upon where I am in the song and what song I'm playing, all of the functionalities of these other controllers change. This one is primarily used for a gain, the amount of gain that is in the reverb channel of the clean parts that I play. So if you listen really closely, there's multiple layers to the clean part that I'm playing, which I'll get into. There's a section that has a certain amount of gain onto it that sounds like it's in the distant because there's a lot of reverb there and delay. And the amount of that gain is controlled with this. If I'm doing an EBO solo, then this becomes a wah functionality or a tonal functionality. This can also become a wah functionality or the guitar volume, depending upon where we are in a song and what's happening. This is primarily vocal echo. Certain songs require a lot of vocal echo, other songs not so much. I can control that with this one. This is the dry to wet guitar volume mix, and a different parameter for guitar volume mix. So there's a lot of layers to my guitar tone, and I can control the volumes of different layers with 3 of these different pedals. Okay, I want to address this ductwork that's behind me. So this is attached to an Antari Z350 Fazer that's in a different room. So this is the smoke. It produces the smoke, and that gets piped in here through this ductwork. And I decided to remove that from the room because the Fazer itself makes a clicking noise when it's pumping the fluid into the heating element. And I've had a number of different Fazers from Chevet and American DJ and stuff, and they all do the same thing. They all make the same clicky noise, and the fan is very loud. But this removes the whole thing. It's a beautiful way around it. It pumps it in here, and there's no sound with that. All right, up next, we're going to follow the wires, and we're going to go to the computer interface. All right, here we are at the hardware side of things, and this is where the audio from the guitar and the bass go into the computer. So here's a guitar input, our bass input, and this is a headphone out, which I pipe to my in-ear monitor so I can hear the drum track while I'm playing. This is a MOTU UltraLite AVB computer audio interface, and I'm also using a MOTU Micro Express MIDI interface. I love MOTU. I've been using them for years. This is a Mk828mk3. This is an older one. I'm actually recording what I'm doing right now on this, and also a MIDI Express 128, which is what I use to pipe MIDI from one of the computers to the camera computer, which will do that video on another day. Would I recommend the MOTU UltraLite AVB? I don't know if I would recommend them anymore. ever since Mac went silicon, they've updated their drivers to be native and to match that. However, they have not worked very well. I get weird artifacts. Sometimes there's delays. I've contacted the company multiple times. They tried working with me for a year, and now it's to the point where they're just ignoring me. It's like, we can't help you. Too bad, so sad. And these things are not cheap. So I'm kind of angry about that. Oddly enough, if I do not install the drivers on a silicon Mac, it works as it should. But you don't have a lot of the fine tuning and functionalities that you would get if you had drivers on that. So you need to have another computer around that you can plug into that's not a silicon Mac, or a different one that you're actually using, even if it is silicon, that has the drivers on it so that you can change all of the internal settings and tweak them as you will. This whole thing runs on 3 different computers, and here we can see the 3 different computers. The audio is on this computer right here. That is an M1 Max MacBook Pro. That's going to be running Ableton. All of the emulation is handled by that processor. All of the video, the lights, and the visuals that are on the screen go to this M1 Mac. This is a Mac Mini, and that's being handled here. And then finally, all of the cameras, the camera switching, and all of that stuff, the actual streaming, compression, and uploading stuff is being handled by this PC right here. And this PC is a very, very powerful server PC that I've put together for my security system, and I'm using it for this case here. Okay, so let's move on to the ins and outs of Ableton's. I'm going to show you what software I'm using. This is Ableton in all of its glory. So this is playing the promo video, which you can see by going to YouTube and my channel. It's 1 minute and 30 seconds long. So it does have pre-recorded material on it, so you see the faders going. But this is how it would look if I were to play it actually live. So this is the arrangement view, and this is the session view. The arrangement view, you can see all the programming for turning on and off different loops. I can change the pan, I can change the volume, I can turn on and off effects. I can have all that preset. There's 75 channels here, so there's a lot going on. When this is actually running the full show, it pretty much pegs the computer maximum. It'll go up to 80% CPU constantly for most of the time. Occasionally it'll touch on 100. I've gotten dropouts, I've gotten crashes. So I'm really pushing it right to the end. With that said, the emulation that I'm using, so everything is digital, nothing is analog, is mostly waves. So all of my guitar emulation and bass emulation is through Waves plugins. And the reason why I'm doing that is, for some reason, Waves has less CPU usage than other emulators that you may be more familiar with. If you want to talk about emulators, the best emulator, in my opinion, for amplifiers is AmpliTube 5. And if you've ever used an emulator and you're like, oh, this just doesn't sound like the real thing, the chances are that you're not playing it through a cabinet or a speaker that's proper for that kind of a thing. Most of your tone is determined by the cabinet or the speaker that you are playing whatever it is through. So if you are using an emulator and playing it through a non-guitar cabinet or a cheap speaker or any of that sort of stuff, or not doing any post-processing and playing it through your monitors and saying, well, why doesn't this sound like a real guitar? You're doing it wrong. So give emulators a chance. AmpliTube 5 has the best amplifiers. Helix Native has the best sound effects by far. I've tried basically all of them. Native is also very good, but they're mostly metal. They do very well, metal emulators. But back to this. So on the guitar track, I've got guitar in selected. The reason why there's 75 tracks is because I split up my guitar sound into so many different components, and then that gets split up into each loop component. So right off the bat, if I look at my main reverb, which is pretty much the main tone that I'm using, I split this up into clean and delay. I split this up into a ping pong delay, an Adriatic swell on the delay side, and then on the clean side, it all comes back to a reverb, and then I have an auto pan that occurs. All right, that's just one of these. For each of the others, like MIDI guitar, MIDI bass. So what that is I use guitar to MIDI, which is a plugin, which is on a different computer here. Anyways, what happens is it takes the input signal coming from the guitar and a bass, analyzes it, and turns it into a MIDI track in real time. There is some delay on it. It's around 12, 15 milliseconds. I can hear it, but if you put it through a bass sound that has a long swell to it, or something that has not a lot of attack, but has a lot of noise or other longevity to it, it's going to sound just fine. You will not notice the difference. Okay, so that's what is happening there. I've also got a solo guitar, a distortion guitar, and then EBO solo, which also contains multiples. So within that, it gets looped out. And each one of these, so if I loop out guitar 1, it goes into these chains, which I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 different loopers within guitar 1 chain. So that's why there's so many channels on this. And each one of those loopers has to contain a different emulator on it. So that's why it's also CPU intensive. And you might be asking, well, why don't you just take the loopers and then send them through one emulator? The problem is when you do that, if you have a lot of delay or something that has a lot of longevity onto your sound that goes for seconds and seconds after you stop playing, when you change a scene, if it's all going through one emulator, it's going to cut all that off and it's going to sound horrible. So you want to be able to have the looper continue even after you've changed scenes or riffs or any sort of program changes along with your set. So that's why it's so complicated. Same thing for the bass. There's tons and tons of different bass tracks within this, which I'm getting, there it is. Gotta get to the right one. So if I go through all of this, it gets split out. This actually gets split out more times than the guitar. And that's because I also have a bass heavy on here that drops everything an octave on top of that, which adds to the reverberation of the bass on top of that. The rest of this, all to the right here, everything from this point over, that's all vocals. It's all video stuff, which I'm going to get into in the next video. That's going to be all through ShowSync and Beam. Okay? So I think that pretty much sums up everything for this video. Be sure to join me June 3rd at 7 p.m. to watch all of this in action. Hopefully it doesn't crash and it serves its purpose. Until then, be well, and I hope to see you soon.